I've been following Formula Top since I played a excellent Steam Next Fest demo last year on it, and I'm delighted to say, after its first week in early access, that this is shaping up to be an absolute cracker of a racer. There's definitely a question for people that haven't bought this game as to, do I buy Formula Top or do I buy Ultimate Racing 2D2? And my answer to that is both. Both are great, both have their own unique style, both have their own unique flaws, and both bring something different to the party, and I wouldn't want you to limit yourself to one or the other. Both are fantastic, and yeah, we're going to focus on Formula Top here, but just keep that in the back of your mind because I will refer back to Ultimate Racing 2D2 at various points in this review. The first distinction is the graphic style, which sounds very obvious, but Formula Top is 3D top-down racing, and what that allows you to do is have much more of a sense of scale and depth and topography, basically, as you're moving around the circuits. And nowhere is this demonstrated better than you going around Brazil, which is essentially Interlagos, because you do get to see that dipping down into the bowl, or the natural bowl of that circuit, and it really makes the game pop visually, because the low poly aesthetic, it's really nicely done, and it reminds me of mini racing online on steroids. And there's no bad thing about that whatsoever. This also then means that modding, I think, will be quite interesting in the future, because you'll have to have 3D polygon models, because Steam Workshop is apparently coming to this game later on down the line. Does that extend to the cars, which are currently only Formula cars at the moment? Or if that just extends to the track and a track builder, who knows? But it's worthwhile noting that although Steam Workshop is going to be coming later on down the line, the fact that this is a 3D game versus a 2D painting map will probably mean that Ultimate Racing 2D2 is going to be the easier game to mod. However, when you get into the actual racing of Formula Top, there's quite a lot of distinctions between what goes on here and what goes on in Ultimate Racing 2D2. In Formula Top, there's definitely more to it than meets the eye, and it takes a few hours for you to kind of go, hang on, there's more juice going on in these races. Firstly, I want to talk about the handling, which is really on point, and I feel much more subtle than Ultimate Racing 2D2, because it seems to have a better implementation of controller controls, if that makes sense as a sentence. And that's because there's more nuance to the triggers with the brake and the accelerator, and this also translates across to grip. So you'll have 3 different types of dry tyre compounds, your soft, mediums and your hards, but the way how grip falls away on your tyres means that you light up the tyres slightly when you accelerate out of corners, rather than struggling under braking. And so it means that you can still make corners easier on this game, but you'll need to feather the throttle slightly, and you lose time that way under acceleration if you want to keep your car in a straight line. You can still throttle it down and try and go nuts, but then you'll spin up and you'll lose even more time on the exit of corners, which then means that you lose time down the straight and so on and so forth. So the implementation of grip is slightly different here, but it also means that when you're then translating that across to strategies, I feel like the crossover of tyres perhaps works slightly better in Formula Top than it currently does in Ultimate Racing 2D2, which feels much more binary, whereas with Formula Top I feel like I have more control in how much grip I expend and how much rubber I expend by being more aggressive on my turning, braking and accelerating. Some of this, I think, also comes down to track conditions, which is a unique thing for Formula Top. So if the temperature is different on a race, your strategy will also become different. And I think that's a really, really cool thing, and it's not something that I noticed initially out of the bag. The other thing is that it is much more hazy when you flick across to intermediate and wet tyres. I was able to plod around on intermediates far longer than changing onto wets than you do in Ultimate Racing 2D2 and quite a lot of other racing games as well. There's always like really specific, I'm thinking like Motorsport Manager, as soon as you crossed over a certain millimetre of rain, you was like, right, on to the next one, because you just automatically lost out. Here in Formula Top, there's more of a blurring of lines, which means that you don't necessarily have to come in straight away, and the AI also seem to know this too. Sometimes, not all the time, sometimes. And so, especially if you're doing it on like the last couple of laps in a race, it's well worth trying to hang it out and hope that you survive, because it's much more of a viable choice, is what I'm trying to say. Now, when it comes to the actual content on Formula Top, this is where it being in early access brings it down slightly. There's 10 tracks across 5 different locations, and the reason why I kind of point that out is that you've got like a classic Monza and a classic Interlagos, so it's just slightly different variations of the same circuit, although I must say that the classic Monza is fab because it takes on the old oval. And so you do the Monza circuit, then you go around on the oval, and it makes the pit lane a bit chaotic because you're like, I need to get in this lap, and actually you realise you can't cross the pit lane because there's a giant oval in the way. But there's also like 4 versions of the same finish ring that you've got kind of going around, so it doesn't feel like a full game in terms of being able to run a decent chunky championship yet. And this is really where Formula Top, I think, is going to invest a lot of its development time to make new tracks, and probably look at if it's going to do Steam Workshop and people are going to do their custom build stuff. If that's going to go into tracks, what does a track editor look and feel like? I don't know. It doesn't really specify what the Steam Workshop's going to do. But there is a link to a written editor for being able to change the values of each of the teams and each of the drivers in Formula Top, so that you can then try and do some like customized mods with it by renaming drivers for something going forward in a championship. The other kind of interesting thing with Formula Top is its options. So you've got a single race and championship for single player, but time trial is limited to you having to go online against other people, which feels a bit odd. The online portions of things I struggled to get working straight out of the bag, and so I found online to be quite disconnecty and flimsy. But again, it's early access, it's not its priority, so you kind of have to take a lot of this with a pinch of salt. But where I was really delighted was with the AI. So as grip started to deteriorate, they start to make mistakes. They don't get stuck trying to get into the pit lane, for example. They do drive on rails, and they will just smash you out of the way, but there's no damage in this game, which is a difference between this and Ultimate Racing 2D2, where damage and DRS and boost and all of that is available in Ultimate Racing 2D2, and none of that's here in Formula Top, and I don't believe much of it is going to be. They have said, the developer, that they're going to implement DRS at some point in the future, but all of the rest, who knows? And so that kind of makes it in a very much Arcadian style in terms of how aggressive you are with racing, whereas with Ultimate Racing 2D2, you're pushed to being much more cleaner. And so this kind of brings me to my general distinction of, if you're going to be forced into a choice of Formula Top versus Ultimate Racing 2D2, Formula Top is definitely the more Arcadian version of this kind of 3D top-down or 2D top-down racing game, whereas Ultimate Racing 2D2 gives you the option to have arcade, but allows you to go full-on sim race if you want to. And so that's the real distinction for me. The arcade feel doesn't just come across in the graphics and the driving and the feel of the game altogether, but it also is in the unlockables. So for example, if you finish in a certain position with each of the drivers in a championship, whenever you do a championship event, you unlock a mini version of that car, and that's quite cool, and very tiddly, and it gives me Micro Machine vibes. You've also got a spectator mode as well, which makes me wet my whistle for future narrated AI championship events. But yeah, this is shaping up to be an absolutely fantastic racing game. My heart is already invested in Ultimate Racing 2D2, so if I'm going to pit the two against each other, that does win, but that's got so many more months of development, an open and rich and really engaged Steam modding community. You can't really, these aren't apples and oranges or apples and pears. You can't really put them side by side together like that and expect a fair competition. But Formula Top is shaping up to be a very, very worthy purchase, and I do recommend it already in its current early access guise to anyone that thinks, I need some more scratching of that arcade top-down itch. Please let me know down in the comments if you want to see more of Formula Top, because I intend to bring you some. You guys will take care. Bye-bye.
Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/Higher Network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.